What's going on, everyone? When it comes to the NBA and the playoffs, nothing is worse than blowing a 3-1 lead, right? You're one game away from advancing to the next round or even potentially winning the NBA championship. I mean, just ask Doc Rivers, right? He's done it 3 separate times. He did it first with the Orlando Magic in 2003 against the Detroit Pistons. He did it twice with the Clippers, first in 2015 against the Houston Rockets, and then again in 2020 against the Denver Nuggets. And so it's just a pattern when it comes to Doc Rivers, and it's a stigma that, I mean, he was even fighting this year, right, with the Philadelphia 76ers. We saw him, trying to defend and go against like the narrative that was centered around him, and it's just a bad look whenever a team or players lose a 3-1 lead. So in this video, I want to talk about the 5 greatest players and put together a starting 5 of the greatest players to blow a 3-1 lead. And of course, Doc Rivers is the coach of that team because he is the all-time leader in blown 3-point leads. But that being said, let's jump into our first point guard, right? So right off the bat, Stephen Curry, right? He is the greatest shooter of all time. He is, in many people's eyes, one of, if not the greatest point guard ever. I don't think he's the greatest. I think Magic is the greatest point guard ever, but I do understand the argument. And I mean, Steph has completely changed the league, unlike any player ever in history, right? He revolutionized the 3-point shot, and it is unbelievable. I mean, he's in the NBA Finals right now as we speak. So it just adds to the pedigree that is Steph Curry. But when it comes to him blowing a 3-1 lead, it is arguably also the biggest 3-1 lead on this list. In 2016, the NBA Finals, he lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers, led by LeBron James, in that epic comeback and blown lead, right? They had the record all-time wins in the regular season. Everyone thought that they were going to cruise to the finals and win the finals. They even overcame a 3-1 lead that is on this list that we'll dive into here shortly, and ended up blowing it in the championship, right? And it was just very disappointing, very upsetting, and it's going to be one of those things that live on in infamy forever. But when it comes to Steph, I mean, come on. Who's a better point guard that has blown a 3-1 lead than him? Arguably, he can be looked at as the greatest point guard ever. But moving on. So, shooting guard, right? The famous, infamous, beloved, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. Now, he goes without saying, right? He is arguably the second greatest shooting guard ever. I think he is. I think he's right behind Michael Jordan. He was the Michael Jordan clone in many ways. I grew up and was a diehard Laker fan. I grew up in the 90s, so I was along the ride with Kobe Bryant. And, his passing was extremely tragic. It affected the entire world, really. But Kobe was that ultimate competitor. He was that guy that he seemed like he was untouchable in so many ways. He was a hungry, fierce, just monstrous type of personality. And, the Black Mamba, all of those things. And to think that he actually blew a 3-1 lead is pretty surprising, I'm sure, to some. But Kobe Bryant did in the Western Conference first round in 2006. He lost to the Phoenix Suns 3-1. That was also the infamous in the final game where Raja Bell ended up like clotheslining Kobe out of frustration and stuff, and it was like a huge thing. I don't know if many of you, if you're old enough to remember, or if you do remember, it was something that it's been so long now. I'm sure it's something that many people don't remember. But yeah, Kobe Bryant. I mean, no better shooting guard than Kobe Bryant to be in this spot. He is again one of the greatest players in NBA history. Many people even argue that he is the greatest player ever. I don't personally think he's the greatest player ever, but he was my, basketball idol growing up. And so he was the one I admired, and to this day, I just so profound, so beloved to me personally. But going into the small forward position is somebody I mentioned when we were talking Steph, Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant, as many may know, in the 2016 Western Conference Finals, lost to the Golden State Warriors. They were down 3-1. Warriors come back. They beat OKC. OKC ends up, breaking apart. Kevin Durant goes and joins the Warriors, right? And that was a whole thing. And then the Warriors, after coming back down 3-1, go and play the Cleveland Cavaliers, build a 3-1 lead, and then lose a 3-1 lead. It was just that playoff series, the entire playoffs for the Warriors was just such a roller coaster ride. I mean, seriously, it was ridiculous. But I mean, Kevin Durant, come on, he is arguably the greatest pure scorer ever. I mean, you're talking a 7-footer that has guard handles, can pull up and shoot and score anywhere on the court. He can play defense. He's long, he's lengthy. The Brooklyn Nets kind of underwhelmed, but he's still arguably a top 3, at the very least top 5 player in the league. I think you can realistically make an argument that he may be the best player in the league. He's just tremendous, and to have him in that small forward position, I think just makes so much sense. Again, for those that, keep it in mind, I'm talking about players that have lost 3-1 leads. So, maybe he's not your all-time small forward, but given this type of list, that's why he's slot here as the small forward for this team. Now, the power forward position. Now, Charles Barkley, which I think is hilarious because him being so opinionated, and it's funny because a lot of the things that Charles Barkley is heavily opinionated on, he actually did himself, right? Forcing himself out of a team to go join forces with stars, underwhelming, losing 3-1 leads, right? Charles Barkley in the Western Conference semifinals in 1995 lost to the Houston Rockets, and that was a huge, major meltdown. That's one of those things that, like, you see documentaries and stuff about. They've literally made those things about Charles Barkley and him just blowing it back when he was with the Phoenix Suns and stuff. And so Charles Barkley, he is an incredible force, an incredible player, super undersized for power forward, but one of the greatest rebounders, played way bigger than he was, an all-time great Hall of Fame type player, and even better personality. I just love listening to Charles. Some of the stuff he says is absolutely ridiculous, but it's just, come on, it's the greatest thing ever. Like, just listening to him go on his rants or talk about things, and then somebody calls him out and is like, didn't you do that too? And he's like, but, it's just, but nonetheless, he is still a tremendous player. And is worthy of an all-time power forward spot, period. But he would be the best one on this list for all-time power forward. So Charles Barkley is our starting power forward. And then moving on to center, which the center position is Wilt Chamberlain. Now, this was the first time a team or player had ever lost a 3-1 lead, and he lost this in the Eastern Conference Finals in 1968 against the Boston Celtics in the great Wilt Chamberlain-Bill Russell rivalries, right? Yeah, you saw those. Those were great back in the early 60s. If you haven't seen them, you can still see them. There's tons of footage, stuff like that. I am a fan of the game. I am a student of the sport. I have seen those games. I have seen, all the highlights, all the throwbacks, basically you name it. I've tried to watch it as much as possible and just digest as much. Basketball is just amazing. How can you not? But yeah, Wilt Chamberlain, one of the greatest centers of all time, Mr. 100 points, a guy that averaged 50 plus in a season regularly. Granted, it was a different time. There wasn't the big bodies that there were in the 80s and 90s. And even the 2000s where you had all these finesse, skilled, and just giants amongst giants, right? This was at a time where Wilt Chamberlain had a reasonable size advantage in many ways, and he was just a force in and of himself. But that's not to take away from Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain was a real force. He was a monster, an incredible rebounder, an incredible scorer, all of the intangibles you need to be an all-time great, and that he is. He is an all-time great, and that's why he is perfect to be the starting center for our 5. So that being said, what do you think of our all-time starting 5? Again, we have Steph at point guard, Kobe Bryant at shooting guard, you got Kevin Durant at small forward, Charles Barkley at power forward, Wilt Chamberlain at center. The question is, do you think that this team blows a 3-1 lead to any team? Do you think like this? Because I think this is a championship team, 5 out of 5 years. Seriously, this has a little bit of everything. You got the shooting, you got the defense, you got the competitive drive, you got the size, you got the grind, you got a little bit of everything. This would be an all-time great team. This would be a team that would be, sweeping through the playoffs, in my opinion, in many ways. But what do you think? What do you think of this team? Do you like it? Is there other guys that you'd like on the list? Maybe even give me a 6th man. Why don't you let me know a 6th man down in the comment section below of somebody you'd add to this team, add to this roster. Again, keep it as somebody that had lost or blown a 3-1 lead. There were other great players on these teams even that you could throw on. Even the Warriors themselves. So you have Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, guys like that. But, Russell Westbrook, was on OKC at that time. So, I mean, there's definitely other guys that you could throw in, and I'd love to hear your sort of six-man thoughts. But what do you think of this team? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's great? What did you think of the list and the video? Let me know down in the comment section. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification. Stay up to date with all things sports. Join this wonderful community and all of our discussions. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.